Alright everyone, Candace Owens was banned off of Twitter the other day for 12 hours, and the reason probably won't astonish you. It probably isn't surprising. The reason is this. She took a Jeong tweet. You remember that bigot who works for the New York Times? And people claim she's not a bigot because of the specific group she was being bigoted towards. You can't be racist against white people is the old tired Marxist line from some of these bigots, which is exactly what they are. It's like, as a libertarian, I'm saying, I don't care if she's a bigot. I don't care if she tells these jokes on Twitter. I just want consistency. I don't want Twitter to ban anyone for offensive humor. I don't care, because if I find it offensive, I'll click away, or I'll debate it, or I'll shitpost or something. Problem fucking solved, dude. You have porn on Twitter. Why do you care if someone's telling a joke about like some racial group or gender demographic? I don't care. Twitter's an 18 and up service. Fucking grow up then. Stop being a fragile little snowflake. That goes for some people on the right that are like, well, Twitter hates white people. No, it doesn't. I'll tell you exactly why this happened. Candace Owens took one of these bigoted tweets and substituted the word white for something else that I think we can all guess, and got banned for 12 hours. I'll tell you exactly why this happened. Twitter, whichever moderator looked at it, had no clue that it was a Jeong tweet, doesn't understand the irony, number one. Number two, let's say they did. They're going to ban her anyway, and here's why. Candace Owens doesn't bring as much money to Twitter as the New York Times does. Jeong herself doesn't matter. She's a small-time Twitterer. She's got a little handle. Like, I think she's got fewer followers than me, actually, or around the same number. And keep in mind, I'm a YouTube. I don't get a six-figure salary working for a multinational corporation that pretends to have U.S. loyalty. No, the New York Times, though, has many, many millions of followers. In fact, I think maybe 10 million. Brings a lot of money to the site. It's just like when government figures use Twitter. It brings the reason why they get deference, even if they say stuff that's technically against TOS, or someone working for them, some staff or something. Twitter wants them there. They bring in a lot of money, but Candace Owens is one person, not the New York Times. Now, the alt media and alt entertainment and alt politics are definitely rising up, but let's face it, no single individual is as big as the entire New York Times. So it goes beyond Jeong. Yeah, they're a respecter of persons. It's sort of like what YouTube did. I mentioned this. It's funny because it involves InfoWars again. InfoWars' channel on YouTube did not get banned despite the fact that more than 3 strikes were amalgamated in a 24-hour period. I found that strange because you're supposed to have your channel down at that point. But apparently they're priority creator, which is extremely odd to me. I'm sure it has to do more with large audience than official message that YouTube endorses. Any day now, they'll probably ban them and say, well, yeah, in retrospect, we're not going to be a respecter of persons like Twitter. We're going to be better, and we're just going to ban them outright. And they'll maybe use that as an excuse. Which I oppose, by the way. They shouldn't have had a strike on any content. They should still be on every platform. Candace Owens was being mistreated, and Twitter doesn't even get why it upsets people when this happens. My idea is this. If a site wants to censor everything, fucking go ahead and censor everything, outside of course, monopolistic sites. Twitter isn't a monopoly. Twitter, what purpose does it really serve? Facebook's a monopoly, technically speaking. YouTube is definitely a monopoly. Amazon, no, a little bit less. There's like Alibaba and Etsy and stuff. eBay. Some of these sites, like Apple. Apple is technically a monopoly too, as far as its app store goes. Some of its phone-related products especially. There are sites that are monopolies. Twitter's not really. I don't really care whether they want to have a heavily censored site or a site that's very libertarian, but they need to be consistent. If you're going to ban Candace Owens for 12 hours for a tweet that is 99.9% the same as something spewed out by an actual bigot from the New York Times, and you're banning her because she is satirizing the fact that Twitter will not ban this New York Times editorialist, you should ban that individual too for 12 hours. For the same exact fucking tweet. It is the same thing. Otherwise, don't ban Candace Owens and leave people alone. Look, Twitter is kind of dystopian because they're like, well, we have the capability of shaping public consciousness, shaping reality, Don't you understand how you fucking sound? By the way, back to the concept of conspiracy theorists. This is the sort of stuff that tinfoil hat people were warning about a decade ago. Like in the Zeitgeist era, I can remember people were like, well, eventually these firms are going to try to melt all of our minds and everything will be propaganda and stuff. It's like, well, at the time I didn't want to believe it because I'm like, well, things are decentralizing more than anything else. More and more people are speaking about more and more different ideas. It's going to be hard. Now they're trying to rein it in. I think they unleashed a monster on the world with the internet in a way. You got to understand that the internet as we currently understand it as an interconnected, instantaneous place of communication and gaming and everything else really has only existed for a decade, or a little bit more than a decade, maybe like 12 years or so. That's the modern internet. Before that, a lot of it's text only, it's less interconnected, social media doesn't really exist. And then you go back to like the mid-90s when it first sort of dawns on the world. For the first 5 years, the internet's basically a bunch of people, weird people, Gen Xers, with their personal websites, you know, spending hours there coding and shit. That was sort of the running joke. It's not until the late 90s that it becomes even slightly interconnected. It's not a very old apparatus. And in that roughly 20-year span, we've gone from, again, basically text only and wow, this is an 8-bit picture. It's so cool, so crisp. My monitor, 800 pixels wide, shit like that, to look at the massive apparatus we have today. But if we want the internet to remain a fun and free place to be, we don't need net neutrality as we had it before for ISPs. We need net neutrality with regards to these monopolistic firms. That's what we really need. While people were so worried about ISPs throttling smaller websites are being throttled out of existence all of the time by the gatekeepers of the internet, which aren't the ISPs. You think an ISP is going to fuck over Google? You think any ISP is going to tangle with Apple or with Amazon, any of these other big firms, like they want to piss off Mark Zuckerberg? That will never happen. They will, however, piss on smaller sites on behalf of these corporate monopolies, but they don't need to. The corporate monopolies will do it themselves. A couple dozen companies control like 99% of the internet. Half a dozen of them control like 90%. Again, Facebook, Apple and Microsoft, Amazon, Google, technically Alphabet, and Twitter. That's basically it. And Instagram and Snapchat and some of these others fall under that same general banner. They are trusts. They are corporate monopolies. They should not be deciding who says what. When, as a country, did we decide that it was even remotely acceptable? When did the left decide it was acceptable for for-profit business entities to control people's minds by controlling what they can or can't say and using a bunch of moral newspeak like family-friendly or quality filter to justify it? If that had happened 10 years ago, you would have been, they would have had rightful indignation. You would have been, totally up in arms, said, well, they're coming for our free ideas. Yeah, and you would have blamed it on corporatism. You would have said, well, it's like Bush's people or something. Now you just roll over backwards because you're a bunch of idiots. No, I condemn this. Twitter is a bad platform. I use it primarily to notify people of uploads. Otherwise, it's just shitpost. I don't even care if Twitter ever bans me. I'll use Gab, dude. It doesn't even matter. Gab and Minds and all these other sites I use, I'm growing faster on them anyway. I've got a quality filter ban of some sort on Twitter anyway that throttles how many new people can actually find me and subscribe to my feed there. It's like, 10 people a day? Meanwhile, I can add 100 people a day on sites that are 1/10 the size very easily because I'm not being throttled. So Twitter at this point is like a tertiary afterthought. It's sort of like Steemit until 2,000 or 3,000 people are following me there. Ultimately, the presence is less important. Now, Candace Owens gets banned. All she did was literally replicate an existing tweet that you thought was perfectly acceptable and change the race that it dealt with. That's all she did. And it shows the stark, utter hypocrisy of Twitter in using its rules. It's a respecter of persons. Ultimately, it enforces its TOS selectively based on what outrages people, what corporations want. That's basically what it boils down to. That's about all. Peace out.